In the 1980s, the government of Sicily faced an unthinkable crisis. They weren't just dealing with criminals. No, the Mafia had embedded itself so deeply into the political system that they controlled the police, the courts, even the elections. One brave judge, Giovanni Falcone, tried to fight back. But in 1992, as he drove along a coastal highway, a remote-controlled bomb containing half a ton of explosives detonated beneath him. The blast was so powerful, it left a crater in the road. Falcone never stood a chance. This was the moment the world realized. The Mafia wasn't just a criminal organization. It was a shadow government. But how did we get here? How did secret crime families go from back-alley extortionists to global power players who could shake entire governments? The answer is as shocking as it is terrifying. Rise of the Mafia, the birth of a shadow empire. The Mafia's roots stretch back centuries, but its modern form began in Sicily in the 19th century. Landowners, desperate to protect their wealth, hired strongmen to keep thieves away. Over time, these enforcers realized something. Why protect the wealth when you could control it? They started demanding payment for protection, not from criminals, but from the people they were supposed to be protecting. This was the birth of the Mafia's infamous protection racket. Then came Prohibition in the United States. It was supposed to shut down alcohol sales, but instead, it created the biggest black market in history. The Mafia was ready. They smuggled whiskey, bribed cops, and built an empire. By the time Prohibition ended, they weren't just bootleggers. They controlled gambling, drugs, even Hollywood, and they weren't afraid to kill anyone who got in their way. Taking over nations, the Mafia's darkest weapon. But the real turning point? Politics. The Mafia learned that power didn't just come from guns, it came from votes. They infiltrated political parties, funded campaigns, and placed their own people in office. In Cuba, Mafia bosses like Meyer Lansky and Lucky Luciano turned Havana into their playground, with government officials on their payroll. In Japan, the Yakuza, a Mafia-like organization, allegedly had ties to politicians at the highest levels. And in Russia, after the fall of the Soviet Union, organized crime groups stepped into the power vacuum, influencing everything from oil to arms deals. In short, the Mafia didn't just take over the streets, they took over entire nations. Unstoppable? How the Mafia became too big to jail. As governments tried to crack down, the Mafia adapted. They became less visible, more corporate. They started laundering money through banks, tech companies, even charities. And when one leader went down, another was ready to take his place. Take the case of Pablo Escobar, the Colombian drug kingpin. When the government finally tracked him down in 1993, they thought they had won. But within days, new cartels filled the void. The system was too big to fail. Even in Italy, where the government waged war on the Mafia in the 1990s, the organization didn't die. It went underground. Today, the Mafia still controls billions in illegal trade, from drugs to human trafficking. And the most chilling part, they don't need violence as much anymore. They have lawyers, lobbyists, and business executives who do their work legally while still answering to the Mafia. The breaking point, when the Mafia went too far. But every empire has its moment of overreach. For the Mafia, it was the murder of high-profile officials. In Italy, the assassination of judges Giovanni Falcone and Paolo Borsellino sparked mass protests. The public finally turned against the Mafia, and the government unleashed its full power. Hundreds of Mafia leaders were arrested. Some turned informants, leading to the largest anti-Mafia trials in history. In the US, the RICO Act allowed prosecutors to dismantle entire mafia families by convicting leaders who had never pulled a trigger. Once feared bosses like John Gotti, the Teflon Don, were suddenly behind bars. But does that mean the mafia is gone? Not even close. They've just evolved. Modern-day mafia, the New World Order. Today, organized crime looks different. It's less about men in pinstripe suits and more about cybercrime, money laundering, and political corruption. The Italian mafia still runs billion-dollar operations. The Russian mafia controls global hacking networks. The Mexican cartels have more money than some countries' entire economies, and their influence still stronger than ever. They've adapted to modern technology. Drug shipments are tracked through encrypted messages. Money is moved through cryptocurrencies. Even human trafficking rings operate like global corporations, using social media for recruitment. The mafia's influence is closer than you think. So, here's the real question. Is the mafia really just a criminal network, or is it something bigger? The truth is, organized crime thrives when governments are weak, economies are unstable, and people are desperate. And if history has taught us anything, it's that the mafia isn't just a relic of the past. It's a blueprint for power that still works today. Here are 3 shocking facts about the mafia that you won't believe. 1. The Vatican and the mafia. In the 1980s, the Vatican Bank was implicated in a massive money laundering scheme involving the Italian mafia. The scandal was so deep that a Vatican banker was found hanging from a bridge in London under suspicious circumstances. 2. The mafia's secret code almost kept it alive forever. For decades, the mafia operated under an unbreakable code of silence called omertà. Breaking it meant death. But in the 1980s, informants, known as pentiti, started talking, bringing down hundreds of bosses. 3. The CIA and the mafia once worked together. During World War II, the US government made a secret deal with mafia boss Lucky Luciano. In exchange for protecting New York's docks from Nazi sabotage, the mafia got reduced prison sentences. And that's not all. Years later, mafia hitmen were allegedly recruited for plots against Fidel Castro. The mafia's power isn't just about crime, it's about control. They've manipulated politics, economies, even law enforcement, and while they've been weakened in some places, they are still very much alive. They've just learned how to blend in. And that's the real danger. The most powerful criminals aren't the ones you see in the streets. They're the ones you don't see at all. Please subscribe to our channel today if you haven't already done so. You can also check out other videos on this channel. Best Time Quest.